I would like to welcome all the panelists. Thank you. And Louis, thank you so much for joining us as well from Blue Sapphire. I consider this panel and the fact that we are having this discussion a significant shift in the cybersecurity decision making space. This panel sits at the intersection of leadership. And when I say leadership, it's not just independent leadership, but rather a collaboration. And a collaboration in today's day and age, which is extremely critical. A recent report said that 42% of senior executives in an organization said that the cyber threats have increased since 2020. And executives and boards are asking themselves two important questions. Are we attacked? If not, then are we vulnerable? Are we next in line? So, the moments like this, when such questions arise, these are a catalyst for collaborations across board. Executives and various cybersecurity leaders today are watching the threat landscape emerge, and technologies too are coming out in full force. ChatGPT, AI, ML, it's their moment in the sun, but this is giving nightmare to security leaders. And that's why a lot of new roles that have emerged need to collaborate now and at the earliest. So, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for taking time out for being on this panel. And I would like to begin with Uday. Uday, we spoke about various titles that are coming up and have to be accounted for in the organization in the cybersecurity space. Could you throw some light on what kind of titles are now in the C suite and who are you collaborating with?
I think in the current scenario, apart from if you look at the CRO organization and the CISO, the laterally in the current scenario, CISOs are interacting with chief business continuity officers, data privacy officers, uh, then data controllers who are primarily in charge of the governance, and primarily these are the ones which they are included. And there's one new coming in was uh, chief digital data security officer also. So these are the four ones which we are primarily working. And again, our reporting relationship with the CRO in the current scenario.
Uday, we were having a conversation in the morning, and you mentioned something about a chief digital risk officer who protects digital assets. How do you collaborate with roles like that?
I think if you look at the overall gamut of CISO, so the primary role of CISO is basically to provide the assurance from people, process, technology perspective, and those assets basically cover from the traditional assets to digital assets also. So in that regards, the B2C component which comes into for the digital assets, which is IoT, robotic process automation, and drone related technology, which is very prominent in our kind of environment. Over there, we have certain people who are only responsible for taking the protection related responsibility for digital assets, and the kind of control framework which we have at this moment for the other technologies gets extended to these technologies also. In that regards, we talk to the chief digital security officer.
Perfect. Thank you, Uday. Murli, hi. You heard about the roles coming up in the organization. How do these roles collaborate for a unified defense strategy? Because you're the first and last line of defense in the organization. And when we speak about collaborations, where do the lines also blur?
So I think the fact is, for a CISO to actually manage a big environment, it practically becomes a challenge that cannot be sort of surmounted, right? Uh, and so in cybersecurity, the philosophy always has been that the more people participate in that venture, the better for the organization. So in our case, in SBI specifically, while we have the traditional roles of the CTO, the audit teams that are there to help us, the a CRO who's obviously the main person behind this. We also have specific roles that are very data management focused kind of thing. So we have a chief data management officer whose task is primarily to look after data quality, data governance, look after the data governance policy itself. And then below him, you have a data management team as well. So it's like not a single man, approach, but there is a team of data management officers whose job is to take it to the next level in terms of defining the policies on the ground. And then you have data governance officers. So while I have worked in many companies earlier, I have not seen such an extensive set of people who are specializing purely on data part of it. Data security is a part of it in the sense they do the data quality and the data management piece. But data security also in our scenario actually is managed by the data management team. So which is a very new construct. I mean, it has usually been the CISO's responsibility for DLPs and all, but here we have the data management team who looks after the DLP environment, right? But they work very closely with us in terms of deciding what kind of policies have to be deployed on the ground, and how to go about doing it kind of thing. I think the fact is that these teams all have to collaborate very closely to each other to give what the organization will require. There is a very clear demarcation in terms of what is the role and responsibility. So it is not like the DMO team sort of gets into cybersecurity or the other way around. The roles are very clearly defined. So I don't see that clash in terms of saying somebody has stepped on somebody's toes kind of thing. But it is a very clear demarcation. But the collective responsibility of everybody is to ensure that we have a data security and cybersecurity in place. We also have a data privacy officer. So though it's not formalized yet in the sense the bill is still to come on, but we also have global presence. So we have a data privacy officer who looks after the foreign offices and ensures that they are secured from a data privacy and security perspective.
Especially where GDPR is concerned.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
So it's a mandate in Europe at least to have a privacy officer, and we are hoping something similar comes up for us as well.
True.
Yes. Thank you, Murli. Manish, uh, Murli set a good precedent of talking about compliance. When such policies come up and they are bound to impact these roles, what do you think is the future, and how big is the impact of these roles in the organization's security strategy?
So eventually, what I feel is CISO role will gradually move towards a chief trust officer's role rather than the CISO's role itself, right? So eventually, if you see the journey of the CISO role today, it started with IT hygiene, reporting under a CTO. Then it went maybe looking after the business applications, reporting under a CIO. Then compliance became a major part of it, and then it broke off from the CIOs, CTOs, and it started reporting to the CROs and the CEOs. And currently, it's a means point of attraction for the board also, right? So this is the way this role has graduated. Now we see multiple branches coming out of this role. Example being the DPOs, the data governance, right? And all these roles will eventually amalgate into the chief trust officer somewhere. And this chief trust officer would be the custodian of the entire security and assurance end to end.
That's a good point you made. Now, as we speak, it's from security officer to leadership, from security officer to trust officer. Building trust is important. On similar lines, how are these regulations and compliances facilitating the need for these roles with respect to governance or security and compliance?
So, Vaishnavi, the very important aspect that has come with these regulations, mandates, and best practices is that the cost to non-compliance is becoming a big risk for organization itself, especially in light of the GDPR regulations. If you're aware that they have revised it from 4% to even higher of the total global turnover, and similar risks are becoming a threat to the business perspective. And with the traditional roles of the C-suite, where it was CIOs, CTOs, and CROs, CISOs, there has been a lot of new technology that has proliferated in the evolving of data-driven businesses, which calls out for an expertise in those areas and a separate practice to be built in those areas as well, which will be very difficult to do justice by making one person wear multiple hats. And that's where the need for having a specialized hat with a specialized skill set with the people has become very critical in really letting the organization succeed in a common objective or the shared vision of the cybersecurity in that space. And having said that, on the lighter note, I would just like to share that with one of the CIOs I was interacting, they also said there is need for a chief technology discipline officer, because we have proliferation of technologies, but the uses or the discipline way of managing this technology is also required, which definitely comes from the governance part of it. And if you see in that light, the price of the discipline is far less than the cost of the regret. So and that's where the whole new emergence of these roles collaborate and contribute in the overall strengthening the, I would say, the profile or the role for the C-suite of the people who are currently running the show. And with one example that I would like to give, in one of the banks that I am aware of, they have a separate practice on data security perspective, which is headed by something called chief crypto officer within that bank, who is looking after the complete key management, the encryption processes which is running in the banks, because use of encryption had grown multiple times from the last 5 to 10 years. And there are so many different encryption systems in place that they need to centralize it, have a single pane of view to monitor it, and it becomes a business critical application for the organization from the threat perspective. Also, with emerging of data breaches, data threats, you might be having a chief data breach officer whose whole aim would become in terms of just ensuring that the breaches that has happened, he collaborates with the license with the governance authorities and ensure that the damage is contained. There needs to be new threats which are emerging. There could be a chief threat officer who's pure would be in terms of collaborating with all the threat hunting intelligence agencies and coming out, in the sense, lessening the burden of these to the one of the people. So where I foresee is that these are definitely the need of our, in terms of the specialization, in terms of underlining the new technologies primarily which are coming up, especially with related to cloud, AI, ML, VR, and with Meta coming in. I mean, so these are something which I would definitely see them coming up and see them contributing in overall fortifying the cybersecurity measures in their organization.
Thank you, Ved. It speaks to the old adage that don't put all your eggs in one basket. We cannot have a jack of all trades. We need multiple masters to secure an organization. One thread that I picked up from your conversation with is you need to present a unified view of security to the outside world to stop the threats. Louis, now that now that you've heard the gentleman describe various roles, and a lot of these roles are your customers from the same organization, how do you ensure that your solutions meet everyone's needs and they meet their business needs?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to answer that. And I want to also add on a couple comments as I'm listening to the input that I'm hearing. It strikes a couple things. I will tell the audience I'm unique in the sense that I am not a CISO. I'm the business unit, right? I'm the person that ultimately you want to support. So when I hear GDPR, when I hear privacy, a few years ago, I would go off and do something, and then somebody would come back to me later and go, no, you can't do that. So this is a great conversation, right? The fact that people like you with your experience are now in the C-suite and strategizing becomes critically important. And I would encourage everybody in the room, as the CISO, don't wait. Don't wait for the business unit to come to you. Go to them proactively, understand their planning, right? Because if you wait until they're deploying and, oh, we're going to have a new go-to-market strategy in next year, and you're only finding about it when it's going out, it's too late. You can't solve all the things that you're talking about. So I think that's critically important. And I just want to share that with the group. In terms of specifically your question, as you know, the challenges grow, what Blue Sapphire is looking to do is to provide a platform that will allow us to run across the entire organization and really address each of the points that's being brought up here. And we view that that's our responsibility, right? Is to make sure that It's delivering the platform that lets all of the different components get addressed, and that's what we seek to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Stay with me for a while. Uh, you also spoke to me a while ago saying all these new technologies that are coming up are actually helping these roles collaborate really well. Do you want to throw some light on that?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, I'll go back to the panel before where they're talking about APIs, and they were giving statistics on the amount of traffic that goes through. In organizations, I'm oftentimes the person that's driving that, right? Because I'm linking the systems between myself and our distributors. I'm linking between myself and our customers. And every time you do that, you open up vulnerabilities. You open up places where attacks can occur and problems can occur. And so ultimately, it just becomes critically important to think through all of that, manage to all of that, and reduce those. So I thought the comments from this panel and the last panel tie together very, very nicely to address exactly what you're talking about.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have two CROs on this panel, Shailendra and Sundar Krishnan. So I have a few questions for you. Sundar, what approach does a CRO take? And when it comes to risk, how do you divide risk into categories and assess its impact on the organization?
Yeah, I think very important to understand what does a CRO do. Basically, we have to aggregate risks across sectors, across technologies, across people, across processes, and across functions. And of course, you broadly have market risk, credit risk, operations risk, and technology risk today. Technology risk used to be part of operations risk earlier, but it's become so specialized. It's become a separate category by itself. And then, of course, the business risk, like if you're in the insurance segment, then in the insurance risk, or in the banking segment, then the banking risk. So, chief risk officer's job is to identify risks, classify them, and also ensure there are action plans in terms of people, process, technology to address these risks. The most important point is the action plan, addressing them, following up, ensuring these are implemented within timelines, and also as a result, risk is reduced. So my aim is to reduce risk across the organization. Having said that, CISO reports to me directly. So if the CISO leaves the job, then I have to become a working CISO. And I've become like that probably thrice. I've had 4 CEOs in my current job. So each CEO was different. So you have to adjust to the difference. It's very important that you collaborate better. And therefore, the adjustment is key. You will have to be flexible enough to adjust to the changing leadership styles, changing strategy. And at the same time, I agree with Ved, and you have to go after the risks. You just can't be left alone. You will have to go after risks, you will have to go after processes, technologies, and people and address them. So we do lots of vigilance sessions across the organization. I've got more than 700 branches, 12,000 staff. So it's very vast. And so you'll have to ensure some kind of location in Kashmir, the same as some kind of location in Mumbai. And therefore, that cohort and the cohesion that you need to achieve. I also have similar people, regional CROs in various regions. They need to speak the same language. And today, the technology risk, which is privacy risk, confidentiality risk, business continuity planning risk, all those risks I have to address. I have to get it certified, and then the board has to also understand the risks. And board today is intelligent, so they ask lots of intelligent questions. How do you ensure passwords are not shared? How do you ensure your knowledge base is secure? How do you ensure your data is not in the dark web? And so we'll have to say, okay, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do. I have to come up with action plans. So that's the CRO's job.
So, when a new technology is spoken about or suddenly gains traction, do the questions also come as a CRO? How are you going to address it?
Yeah. So any new process, new division, new technology comes, we'll have to do a pre-launch review. And in fact, it's become so specialized that insurance product, I get an actuary technological officer, the combo of technology and actuary to review it. Unless the actuary signs, I don't sign. Unfortunately, I have to sign and give the sign to, we are a super regulated company. because all the banks, mutual fund, insurance regulations are tough. Today, a regulatory board member calls us and asks us to look at all these security issues and says, "What have you done for this? What have you done for that?" And so there is inspection, there is an audit. Then our board findings go to them, and so they have a privy to all the risks of various companies. So they go through them and then they challenge you. So new technology, you will have to do a thorough review independently also to ensure you are at the right place.
Thank you, Sundar. Thank you for that explanation. And 4 CISOs, 12,000 staff, that was an insight. Shalendra, you heard Sundar, and I would also want to understand how do you divide risk into categories? And after that, I'll come to the skills question.
So I think it's similar to what Sundar said in terms of as a CRO, you need to have an overview of all types of risk, whether it could be strategic risk, whether it could be operational risk. You need to zoom in, zoom out. So you need to be aware of black swan events which could come and impact you. So something like what's happening with SV Bank or Credit Suisse, its contagion effect, or it could be as simple as what's happening in your branch in Jumri Talaya, which could give you a big reputation risk. So I think it has to be a minutest risk right up to the highest risk. But obviously, you need to have a focused approach. You can't miss the woods for the trees. So I think there has to be a method to the madness and a focused approach. Thanks to the regulator, thanks to being in the financial services industry, I think we have set some pattern in terms of how we will assess risk, how our boards will look at it, and how we will consume it. The other thing which we have done is we have kept the risk appetite limits. So we don't want to restrict people not to take risk. We want to enable people to take risk. We actually want people to take more risk, but in a calculated way which they did not see. So the guardrails have to be there, which is in terms of a risk appetite. What is your product mix? What's your distribution mix? What's the dip in, say, an equity going down and interest rate going up, etc., and its effects on your operating plan. So we have some of that. And the good thing is it's not just the chief risk officer who's interested with doing it, but the entire CXO has their roles and responsibilities, whether it be the CEO, whether it be the sales head, whether it be the CRO, whether it be the actuary. So each one have their roles cut out. And of course, since we are speaking of cybersecurity, a place in the sun for the CISO also.
So do take risks, but there is a safety net. Perfect. And don't miss the forest for the trees. That was a good message. Shalendra, what skills should a modern CRO possess?
CRO or a CISO?
Would you like to throw light on CRO?
Why not? So I think I have a conflict because I don't know whether I have those skills or not. But I think both the CRO and CISO, most important is you need to have a very good understanding of business. And it is not just the technical skills which you have, but you need to know your business, your operating plan, your culture. What do you sell? If my CISO doesn't know that I'm selling in the B class towns and B C class cities, he will make some strategy for A class cities, which say maybe some of the other companies are doing, and which may not be relevant. So most important is to have understanding of the business. The second is unlearn what you have learned, because over a period of time we have added a lot of layers to the way we work. We operate in a conformity bias, and it is very important that you don't become a Frankenstein or a victim of your own operating way. So it is very important you unlearn, and that's how you can learn, and that's not easy. And I would say the third thing, yeah. So these are the two most important things. Yeah.
I like the point when you said you have to unlearn. So it's a lifelong learning process, of course, and the
Yeah,
threats
sorry, I
also
came to the
emerging.
third point. I think you need to dissolve your chambers of excellence or your ivory towers, because each one of us are in our corner cabin, or if you're not in a corner cabin, aspiring to go to the corner cabin. And that's where you create directly or indirectly power centers. And one is power centers, second is these knowledge centers where you think jo main bolu wo sahi hai because I know this better, I am the expert. And that's where you become arrogant, you operate in a particular way. So I think these are the skill sets, or these are the operating approaches which you should keep in mind.
So you don't have to be Bhiku Matre.
Sorry?
Mumbai ka Raja kaun? Where?
Yeah.
Okay, one last question I would like to throw open to the panel. You spoke about these roles, you spoke about a unified view that you need to present to the organization and to the outside world. When it comes to prioritizing security concerns on or risks, is there a conflict between these roles and how do you find a middle ground? Murli, would you like to start?
Sure. Uh, I don't think there's any conflict as such. See, we report into the CRO. We report into the CRO. So obviously it's in the CRO's interest as well to ensure that cybersecurity risks are not there in the environment, or even if it's there, it's to a minimum. So I won't say there is a conflict as such, because whenever we do any strategy from a security perspective, it is always in discussion with the CRO, identifying which are the critical ones, which are the top priority ones, where the money needs to be put in, where the effort needs to be put in, and then preparing a roadmap that sort of says this is how we will do it over the year. So I have not personally experienced that conflict as such. It has been more collaborative between the two teams, because we are actually working towards the same goal at the end of the day. So that's
Thank you, Murli. Yes.
The technology risk slide is what I try and simplify so that the board understands the language. That usually the technology risk or the CISO makes it very technical, and you have to decodify that to the board. Luckily, I'm a specialist security side, so we are on the same page. So there is no conflict. There's a lot of collaboration, and many times for that 1 or 2 slides of the technology risk officer, I try and bring that person to the board and make him present the slide, so that the board gets confidence that there is somebody over there.
Thank you, Sundar.
So I'll speak from CISO perspective. It all depends on the culture of the organization also, because in some organizations CISO is strategic, in some he is technically responsible for rolling out technologies. In some, basically, he is only handling the compliance role, probably in the regulatory industries. So in all those aspects, basically, it all depends on the matters how he speaks the language with others. For example, if he's reporting into CIO, he should be able to present the technical quantification of the risks. But when he's speaking to CRO, he should basically put the business context into it. So in one of the board meetings, I was asked one question, and I was really surprised that you are running security awareness campaign and you're asking people to complete the awareness test, etc. But how do you measure the effectiveness of those awareness program? And I was really surprised to hear that question at that level, because we don't measure it actually. There are methods to measure by doing phishing campaigns, etc. But at that time we didn't have that maturity to do it. So I was supposed to speak at that language at the board level to give that context. So CISO needs to basically wear different hats at different time and then give that perspective. Then only he'll be able to collaborate better.
Sure. Moving on to Manish quickly.
See, security always comes at a cost, right? And business wants to be very agile. Security has to catch up to that agility ultimately, right? So if you're able to make a business understand, make the technology persons understand what is the benefit that security is bringing on board, and if they actually resonate with that, then it's no more a hurdle. Then it adds to the value, ultimate business value, and maybe that language has to be spoken with the correct folks.
So strong communication is important, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for taking time for this panel. We spoke about various roles that have come in and how each role has to wear multiple hats, but they have to be masters in their own domain and also provide a unified defense strategy to the board and to the outside world. And thank you so much for your insight. It was a great conversation. Thank you.